Today we're going to be visiting the Horniman Museum and Gardens in South London. It's a really fascinating museum which has been on my list of museums to visit for many years, and I finally got round to it. I have to tell you, one of the best rooms is closed, so this is going to be quite a short visit, and I guess we'll be returning next year when they reopen the Natural World Hall with the famous walrus. There's a walrus which was stuffed by a taxidermist who'd never seen a walrus before, and it came out a lot more smooth and curvaceous than the rather chubby and monstrous walrus normally looks with its waves of flab. But we're heading into the gardens. There's a beautiful frontage, very striking building with a mosaic on the front, the tower. Round the back here's a more modern hall, but the main halls, the World Gallery and the Nature Gallery, are still very much in keeping with the original museum. They've kept the structure and the fabric of the building. We're going to start with the gallery upstairs, a series of changeable exhibits. Here it was AI generated images with various Nigerian tribe like Yoruba here, and it was different tribes from around particularly Africa, and very striking images. It's very much in keeping with this hall because this hall is effectively like a mini Pitt Rivers museum. It's an ethnographic collection from around the world, partly from Horniman's private collection which started it. He travelled very broadly, and there's some wonderful examples from India, Thailand, the Inuit peoples, Eastern Europe, Central Europe, Africa. And here's a few personal details about Horniman. And a fascinating display case here. Gives you a bit of a feel with the mixture of helmets and Asian masks, little pagodas down there, beautiful pieces that he collected around Japan there, along with what looks like a Zulu war shield there and beautiful blue butterflies. Here some Indian pieces, Confucian, Chinese, everything from a pipe to a junk to vases, sculptures, gods. Really fascinating collection here. Try not to knock that vase. Here, Egyptology, a mummy case, a pharaonic boat, a case. I'm not sure if that's canopic jar case. It does look a little bit of an odd shape for that. But to the right, that small wrapped coffin is actually a mummified ibis, because they didn't just mummify people for ritualistic purposes. They also mummified other animals. Cats are the ones you see most often, but that's one of the better ibises that I've seen. Here again, it's the changeable display, and this is AI generated images of playing cards inspired by West Africa, and some very striking photos of Africa. This is walking round the balcony above the World Hall, and as you World Gallery, and as you look down you can see the display cases with really an excellent collection. There's a signpost to various cities around the world. The green door there is where you enter the World Gallery, which sadly is closed. Here, a really lovely Chinese temple bell. But work down the stairs, there's a Lego reconstruction of the museum, and it's really quite an excellent little model with every detail down to the famous walrus, which if I'd looked down you'd see, and a motorbike, which we'll see in a minute. Here's some fascinating spears and ceremonial wear. Striking collection of everything from an Aztec offering for the dead, a helmet, and a Palm Sunday donkey. Really all kinds of ethnographic material. Really, this is a collection of everyday items, ritualistic items. You can see here the shadow puppets. Really beautiful collection of shadow puppets on the one side, and on the other side the hats and masks from dancers in those, along with a lot of Buddhist material through to collections from Papua New Guinea, and I believe this is Kiribati, some of these. Chinese material, a lot of family obligation material. That's various family gods and deities, offerings. On the corner on the right there are funeral offerings, grave goods, and in the centre was a family's private ancestral temple. Here you're into Tibetan with a Tibetan prayer mat and a selection of materials from Tibet, from clothes to ritualistic materials, prayer wheels, necklaces, and items for making food even. Oceania we'll be back to in a second. But here, fascinating collection of tribal costumes, everything from swords made from fish, and model boats and hats and helmets. I love in the middle there's a helmet made out of a puffer fish. It's really strikingly weird, really. It's quite an unusual item to see, and I'm sure very delicate. Here, Aboriginal art, you can see the different designs and patterns. Really beautiful dress here. And there's lovely descriptions, really describes very well what you're looking at. Everything is themed by region, a bit unlike Pitt Rivers where it's selected by usage or purpose. Here it's by region, so you kind of see the links between them from the prow of a boat there. It's a delicate model. Here this cabinet's Poland, and you can see religious offerings, eggs for Easter, marriage costumes from the mountains around Zakopane, various folk items. Here Sweden, it's a Christmas Day dinner from Sweden and the New Year. You can see the designs there. Interesting collection of items from the home. Here these are trinkets from around Britain from soldiers, so they were items that soldiers took to war as charms against being shot or injured. Each one was a totem that they'd return safely, and a large collection of weapons, tribal masks, carvings, offerings, tools. This is from India. So protection, charm, a god. Here everything from guns to shields to wicker helmets, horn and carved ivory. Great selection of masks. I knew someone who collected masks years ago, and he definitely would have liked this selection here. That's what he wanted his hallway to look like. Here, fascinating selection of very recent and modern, very old, tribal, different cultural items from around the world. Then into the colder climes, we have a selection of Inuit and Eskimo clothing, carving, every aspect of the animal being used. You see the net for catching a stuffed seal down there and wildlife from that ecosystem, along with carved ivory, where you can see on walrus ivory beautiful carvings of boats and figures. Here it's selection of clothing. It's very cold up there. You do want to wrap up warm, and it's all using natural fibres and materials. American Indian costumes and items from a range of tribes in America. Onto the Pacific. Fascinating collection of really beautiful items. Totem pole, I did like the explanation of the totem poles here. You often see a totem pole with a series of animalistic figures, and it's never really explained. There's one outside the Horniman Museum, and I think we saw one in the British Museum recently, and there's a wonderful one at the Royal Ontario Museum in Toronto. But when you look, you don't necessarily understand the meaning and purpose of each of the animals, whereas there's a lovely explanation of what actually each figure represented. It's very striking. Feather top with reed dress and horns. It's actually quite a modern outfit, but certainly very eye-catching. Then here a selection of local hair products. And then from the Great Kingdom of Benin, there was a large collection here from the Kingdom of Benin. Benin was next to Nigeria, and they were negotiating a trade deal with the British. British weren't very happy with it and went in and forced their hand with military force. And after that, a lot of items ended up in British museums. So the Horniman has sent most of the 72 items that they got their hands on back, but some of them are still displayed in the case there. Here from Arabia, a stuffed camel with tribal gear, and a mix of new and old and traditional items from the Arabian Peninsula. It's very beautiful examples of native clothing and weapons from really a very large collection here. When we come back, maybe we'll have a little bit more detailed look at this, but as I say, because half of the museum was actually closed, it's hard to do justice. Just want to give a taster for this lovely museum with fascinating mix of ethnology on this side, natural world and stuffed animals and paleontology on the other. And here the music, I really enjoyed the music room. As you come in, there's hundreds, and I do mean hundreds. There's not quite 1,000, but each item's numbered, and I saw 970. So a immense selection here. Here, keyboard instruments, clavichords, old lutes, and a recorder or flute from its day. Old version of like a mini cello. And here a French collection. You have the cor anglais, the flute. What at the top there, I believe it's a bit like bagpipe. Not quite. It's not a flute or a recorder. And a selection of keyboards, harpsichords, pianos, electronic keyboards. Beautiful, but the best is when we turn around. The selection of brass and string instruments. Here you see different types of drums, cymbals, percussion instruments. everything from a horn there, some conch, a big conch that you can blow, into a selection of really lovely old stringed instruments here, from violins and violas, ukulele, different types and sizes, different types of flute, and there's a wonderful selection of recorders where you have a bass, contrabass, sonato, piccolo, alto, treble, all the different sizes you can see today, but quite lovely old examples. Here an oud, everything from a modern electric guitar to this percussion cabinet with the, looks like a carabao at the bottom, which is struck to make a sound, bells, recorders, oboes, nose flutes, handheld drums. Over here you have some birds that make beautiful sounds, which is in keeping with the natural world section that's closed. Here, these are shells which can be used to make a sound. Here, it's not a real tuba, it's an oversized tuba. It was a marketing display piece on the front of a shop in Edgware in London for many years, and just a lovely example. I had to look really closely to check it wasn't real. It looks more plastic on the camera than it does in person. And here, well, what a selection of every type of brass instrument you've heard of and never heard of, from sousaphones and tubas and trumpets and cor anglaise and the serpentines here, the lovely horns, clarinets, oboes, here into the recorders, the different types of bass recorder, piccolos, altos, trebles, different evolved forms of flutes, keyboards, bagpipes, saxophones. Really lovely selection of harps here, and bowed instruments, really, with the everything from lutes and resonators. I saw a bandoria, a lovely little bandoria here, and a lot of native instruments from around Africa, Asia, Australasia, where you can see the evolution of musical instruments in terms of, when you have something like a violin or a viola, there were precursor instruments which all coalesced into one single type, but also forms which died out. Here, the tubas and trumpets, trombones. It's fascinating one on the floor in pieces that's not been reconstructed, but really a lovely selection if you have any interest in music. There used to be a room of musical instruments at the V&A. It was old medieval and Baroque era musical instruments. Somewhere about 15 years ago it moved to another museum, and I think some may have come here. And here you see the selection of squeeze boxes, from accordions to bandoneon, concertinas, Indian harmoniums, missionaries, flutina, every form of accordion you never knew existed. And now we've been through the music section. The animals from the Natural World Gallery, a small selection of them have been moved to this temporary space where people can come and see and enjoy them. A lovely selection of a family of badgers, the flamingo, a family of foxes. I certainly will be back next year when that gallery opens. There is also an aquarium downstairs, but we're keeping this as a brief trip because only half the museum's really open. We'll have a quick skirt around the gardens. This is round the side of the World Gallery. You can see the scaffolding on the roof of it in the background. Magnificent glass house with wrought iron and a tile patterned floor. With a little sun terrace here, there's a cafe where you can come and have a light snack or a cup of tea or coffee. And really large flowing gardens here. A series of terraces of gardens. A lot to see. As you make it up the slope there, there's a series of fields and trees, and you can snatch a glimpse down in towards London. Behind me here is an animal farm, so you can go and stand pretty close to wild animals or semi-wild animals and enjoy seeing a range of wildlife in their habitat. Very nice for the kids, I'd say. There's a crazy golf, I think it's an 8 or 9 hole just up there. Looks rather small and was shut the day I was there. But on this open terrace, there is a bandstand. You can't actually go on to that. It sort of juts out over the hill. But you can see a lovely view of London. And just to give you a taster of the gardens, there's a sunken garden in a series of terraces where you have very well kept manicured gardens that you can stroll around. It's alive with birds and bees and insects and full of people just sitting enjoying this beautiful serene spot. So I hope you enjoyed our visit to the Horniman. We'll come back and do a proper visit when the full museum's open. But I would say well worth a visit. The ethnographic section is very interesting, and I like the way it's displayed by country and culture rather than by use, because it can be a bit overwhelming when at the Pit Rivers you see, and this is Asian gods and demons, and there's 300 completely different from different cultural origins and thought processes, which don't necessarily sit well together if you're digesting it, although it's intensely thorough. And then you have the World Hall, which was, well, the Nature Hall, which was closed when we were here. And the musical instrument section is fascinating. I don't know if you play an instrument. If you play an instrument, you'll see it there. If you don't, then I'd say you'll see interesting instruments that quite fascinating, and a beautiful garden. So a good day out, and I hope you enjoyed our visit. Please do like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week for another museum visit.